Ever since Bethesda announced that they would be delaying the launch dates of both Starfield and Redfall to sometime in the first half of 2023, many people, myself included, have been wondering two things. When exactly will these games be released in 2023? And more importantly, I'd argue, is which game will release first? You could make a pretty good case for either of these titles launching before the other, but I'm just gonna cut right to the chase and answer the question. I do believe that Redfall will release before Starfield, and that it could be launching anywhere from January to March of 2023. There you go, folks. Video's over. Thanks for watching. There's no way I'm making a video on this topic and not elaborating further with some personal opinions and providing what I think is a pretty solid thought process about why I think Redfall will be launching before Starfield in 2023. So without further introduction, let's jump right into it. Let's start with Starfield, since this is the game that everyone and their grandma has been talking about. To say that Starfield has been long anticipated and hyped to oblivion would be an immense understatement. I can only think of a few other games in my lifetime that have generated this much excitement and conversation. Games like Skyrim, GTA 5, and Cyberpunk 2077 come to mind. However, even with all of the hype and the possible temptation by Bethesda and Microsoft leadership to launch the game before it's ready, Starfield needs as much time in the oven as possible. I would argue that the reputation of Bethesda Game Studios is at stake here, as they have had a visible decline in quality over the past several years. Skyrim was the last game they released that genuinely won hearts and minds, and while Fallout 4 was certainly a good game, it simply did not live up to the gold standard set by both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, and the reception to the game has become even more mixed as time has marched forward. And then there's Fallout 76. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this one because the story of this game has been very well documented by others in a far more eloquent manner than I could ever achieve. I will say though, for the sake of my argument, that the damage Fallout 76 caused to both Bethesda Game Studios and Bethesda's reputation at large cannot be undersold. The gaming community demonized Bethesda, even going so far as to completely ignore their published titles, writing them off, games that weren't even made by BGS, causing them to become sales disappointments when they deserved so much better. Fallout 76 became the laughingstock of the games industry, and even though significant technical polish and gameplay changes have been made, there is no recovery in sight when you have a launch that is that disastrous. Suffice it to say, Starfield needs to stick the landing when it launches next year. Gamers are no longer going to settle for the buggy messes that Bethesda Game Studios games have been in the past. Starfield has to launch in a largely bug-free state with a remarkable amount of polish and technical shine if they want to recapture the fans that they've lost over recent years, myself being among one of those fans. Now don't get me wrong, I do want Starfield to succeed, and I want so badly to see BGS relive their glory days where their games were the talk of the town, but we have to exercise some patience as a community, because I personally feel that this new generation of gamers has become far too impatient and far too conditioned to expect everything right away. We have to give BGS the proper time to deliver what could very well be their magnum opus. In short, no, Starfield will not be the first game to release between it and Redfall, and if I had to put the finger on the pulse of when I think it could possibly be released, I'm thinking that Bethesda will use up pretty much all the time they've been given by the delay and release Starfield sometime in either May or June of 2023. This launch window also practically guarantees no competition from other publishers, because who would want their game to be absolutely trounced by Starfield in its launch window, which is an inevitability at this point. Late spring and early early summer is traditionally the dry season for AAA releases, so Starfield would be the perfect oasis for us to spend all of our time in. Now, as far as Redfall is concerned, there is also plenty to discuss. One of the most important reasons that I believe Redfall will release first is that the game is seemingly much further along in its development than Redfall, at least from a glance. Sure, Starfield has been in development for going on 7 years now, and Redfall, comparatively, has only been in development for 5 years, but BGS games traditionally have launched in a far buggier and unpolished state than many of Arcane Studios' prior releases, Dishonored 2 on PC notwithstanding. So that extra development time is going to benefit Starfield even more greatly than Redfall, I would argue. Another thing to consider is that the scale of BGS's open worlds is immense, and that scale cannot be understated. Their games are massive in size and scope, and that is bound to create unforeseen problems.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Arcane's games have been much more linear in nature up to this point. BGS has always taken more of a kitchen sink design approach, where they try to cram as many different features as possible into their games, allowing for that player expression to shine through. Redfall will be an open world game, but we shouldn't expect it to be on the same spectrum as something like Skyrim, for example. Arcane have a much tighter thought process on their design team in trying to make the game as wide as an ocean and as deep as, well, not a puddle, but maybe a lake. Redfall's open world will be a little bit more contained while still allowing that sense of player freedom and exploration that we've come to expect from an Arcane Studios title. In a recent Game Informer article pertaining to Redfall's gameplay reveal, studio director and co-creative director on Redfall, Harvey Smith, stated that they were beginning to lock in the content and begin the polishing phase of development for the game. Redfall is no longer hitting in 2022. Arcane is now aiming for the first half of next year. Despite the uncertainty in date, Smith makes it sound like the team is getting close to the finish line. We're very clearly past our launch date, he says with a laugh. I don't know what we can say on this, but we're moving toward content lock, and after that, it's just months and months of polish. For Redfall's launch window, I'm thinking right around March, which is when many people thought that Starfield might launch, but as I've just explained, I think Starfield needs a little bit more time in the oven than Redfall does, quite frankly. This also gives Redfall enough breathing room and distance from Starfield so that it won't be completely overshadowed by it in everyday gaming discussion. Redfall will hopefully bring even more attention to Arcane Studios than Deathloop did last year, when it was racking up high review scores like it was nothing. It's also the only other big first-party title besides Starfield launching early next year and day one on Xbox Game Pass, so many eyes will be on Redfall when it launches. The last thing Bethesda wants to do is cannibalize themselves by dropping Redfall anywhere near the launch date of Starfield, because as much as I love Arcane and want their games to succeed, putting it up against Starfield in a 1v1 situation would be a death sentence, and I'm being generous using that terminology. Arcane's games have historically landed in very crowded release windows where the odds are stacked against them. Prey launched in May 2017, and it had to contend with Injustice 2, while Dishonored 2 arguably had it much worse, launching in November 2016 alongside Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Note that Infinite Warfare was panned by critics and gamers alike, and it still went on to be the best-selling game that year. The point is, releasing Arcane's games in a month where there will hopefully be very little in the way of competition will be a massive boon for Redfall. And this is completely separate from the fact that Redfall has many of the things that mainstream gamers are looking for in a big-budget AAA title. First-person shooter with 4-player co-op in an open-world setting with 4 different character classes to choose from. This game smells of mainstream game's success if it can manage to break through and retain a healthy player base at launch and afterwards. However, Bethesda would be smart to give Redfall its time in the spotlight before its thunder is inevitably stolen by Starfield when it launches afterwards. So these are my roughly articulated thoughts on why I personally believe that Redfall will launch ahead of Starfield in 2023. But now I want to know what you think in the comments down below. Which of these two games do you think will release first? Are you more excited for Starfield or Redfall? Are you excited for another game that may be releasing next year? Let's discuss. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and share the video with other members of the Bethesda community if you enjoyed it. It really helps out. Consider subscribing to the channel for more Bethesda-focused content like this, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. And remember that the outsider walks among us. Thanks for watching, everyone.